Everybody, first James Byers. This is going to be a different session than all the other sessions because you are going to be in the class and talking and actually working, so you need to have your laptops with you. And I expect you to raise your voice and answer my questions. I have job for you to do. Let's just put it like that. So if you're not comfortable with this, the other session might.
You come here to work.
Yeah, you're coming here to work. And you're not going to be writing any code, but you're going to do reading. You're going to read and you're going to think, and then you're going to raise your voice and tell me what you think
About what you just read. And if you don't want to talk, I have an option where you can actually submit questions and comments in writing as well. And then I will get them on my screen, I hope. But we're going to time box this to 45 minutes. But as I said, it kind of depends on how active you guys are, how much you want to say. So if you're really quiet, then we have an early coffee break. And if you are really talkative, then we will have a coffee break according to the schedule. So, how many of you have read software documentation that made you feel stupid? It's not a nice experience, right? Especially when you're like a professional developer, you have lots of years of experience. And then you're trying out this new thing, and now you want to change the background color. And after 2 hours, you haven't been able to figure out how to change that freaking background color. And then you feel like a fraud, and you feel stupid, and you never want to see that damn thing again. This happened to me with Vaadin 14 after having been working at Vaadin for many, many years. And I started at Vaadin 15 years ago. Back then, Vaadin 6 had just been released, so we're talking October 2009. And at this point in time, Vaadin was just a library. I think we even had it as a selling point, that Vaadin is not a framework, it's a library. It's a single jar file. You just drop it into your Java web application project, and then you add a few lines to your web.xml, and then you have a single class that extends the vaadin.com.ui.application class, I think, and then off you went. So it was just a library, and you could do it in many different ways. Obviously, it was a Java library, so it worked with Java, but there wasn't any Spring integration. We didn't have any JPA integration. We didn't actually tell our users how to use Vaadin. You had to figure that out on your own. And turns out that was a problem because, people had to figure out how to use Vaadin on their own. And let's just say that some ways are better than others. There are certain. I've seen Vaadin used in many different ways, and I've been working. The past 14 years, I was as a services consultant, so I was working with customer projects, real-world Vaadin projects. Now I'm in product design, and I've seen like everything. I've seen Vaadin used in a code base that was 25 years old, an old Swing app written in the early 2000s and still working really, really well with Vaadin. It was built using the patterns of like 20, 23, 25 years ago. So you could tell by looking at the code how old the app was, but it was pretty well built by those standards, and it was still working with Vaadin. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have these really, really, really new Spring Boot, everything, bells and whistles Vaadin apps. And then a whole bunch of ways of, less successful ways of using Vaadin. Let's put it like that. And a lot of the examples that we have were more or less like hello world examples. And not necessarily only ours, but let's put another show of hands. How many of you have run into the phrase, obviously you wouldn't do this in production in documentation? So how would you do it in production then? Well, the documentation doesn't say, because you have to figure that out on your own, because often it's a bit more complex than you can fit into a few lines of hello world examples that you normally find in software. So we decided that we want to do something about this. So this is our vision. I want to point out, this is our vision. This is what we're aiming towards. So the Vaadin Way. This is the Vaadin Way. It's an opinionated look at how we think that modern business applications should be built. From the UI, but not only the UI, but all the way down to storage, system integrations, deployment, data design, domain-driven design, UX design, basically everything that you need to know in order to be a successful business app developer with Vaadin should be covered in the Vaadin Way. And it scales progressively from a demo to a hobby project to serving even the most demanding enterprise needs. So by this, we mean that you should start out small and simple with just this little demo. And then as you learn more, you should be able to turn it into a hobby project. And as eventually, if it scales up to a real enterprise application with all the bells and whistles, you should be able to follow this path without backtracking too much. So that means that you're not going to start out with enterprise integration patterns in a Hello World app. But eventually, if you reach a point where you have to add enterprise integrations, you don't have to undo everything you've done before because you haven't painted yourself into a corner. So this is the vision with the Vaadin Way. And also, since we're now selling Vaadin as a platform, a full stack platform, it's not only the UI anymore. When I started, we had a training slide that said that from the user's point of view, the application, the UI is the application. So we were very much focused on the UI. Now we're focusing on the full stack. So we have everything. And in practice, this means that we intend to rewrite our entire documentation. And our documentation has been growing during the past years. We merged Hilla, we merged Flow into Vaadin platform, we merged the documentation. That means that right now our documentation is a bunch of documents written in very different styles. There's some tutorial-ish styles, then there's some reference materials, then there's some how-tos, and then there's some slightly outdated stuff that's still listed, and the latest version is at the very bottom of the page. And we want to change this. We want to rewrite this into like a coherent whole, if you will, that tells you everything you need to know to build apps the Vaadin way. And eventually, our samples, our demos, our starters, hopefully even Copilot will start to follow this Vaadin way as well. So that's the vision. Problem here is, of course, that we need to figure out what the Vaadin way is. And so far, I've been basing a lot of the stuff that I've been writing on my own experience for the past 14 years. I've been talking with my colleagues. I will be talking with you guys today because you are now a part of figuring out what the Vaadin way is going to be. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna, whatever you say is gonna be copied straight into the Vaadin way, but I need to know what the biggest pain points are, and also, and not only the pain points, but also things that have worked out really well that you would like to be included in the Vaadin way, so to speak. Another thing that's happening while we're trying to invent the Vaadin way is that we have to actually eat our own dog food. So we have to try out these things and we have these certain ways of doing things, and because we've always done it that way, and we have to really think about, is this the best way? So actually mapping out the Vaadin way has led to us discovering many things in our products that we need to change, or that we need to improve, or that we need to fix. So hopefully the Vaadin way of building apps will not only lead to better documentation, but also to improved product features. So where are we today? So I've been working on this since I guess February this year. So we have some content online already on our documentation site, and that's the content I'm gonna ask you to read or look at shortly. And we haven't removed any of the old documentation just yet, but the intention is that eventually we will start migrating articles from our old documentation into this new format, so that we at some point would end up with a holistic view. This is how you build apps with Vaadin. But it's going to take some time, which is why I want to emphasize that this is actually a project, or is it a product? It's a process. The Vaadin way is not something that's set in stone. It's going to change and it's going to evolve as we learn new things, as we gain new insights, as our products improve. Things that we considered to be best practices yesterday might no longer be best practices tomorrow, because we figure out something new. Then we also need to figure out what we're going to do about all the links to the old documentation. How do we get the redirects in place when we start to have this new structure? Because we're going to be changing the structure of documents as well. So there's a lot of challenges ahead, so to speak. But I'm quite happy with what we have already. So I thought I could show you, if I can get the screen here to work properly. So I could show you what it actually looks like. So let's see what happens now. Ask it to mirror my screen, and now it's thinking. It is one of those older last Intel MacBooks that I still have. Probably gonna ask for a new one next year, in case in case my boss is here. Actually, he is. So if you're listening, I'm gonna ask for a new MacBook next year. Yeah, I was gonna wait for that one, and then of course I'm gonna ask you to get me the most expensive. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. We have it for now. It's intentionally hidden at the very bottom because of this work in progress. Because if you don't know what this is the first thing you run into, you will be a bit confused because there's so much stuff missing. So right now it's at the bottom, but our intention is that eventually this flow and hill sections at least will be completely removed, and instead you will have building apps, and it will cover everything you need to know in order to build a real world Vaadin application, both with Flow and React, and that actually works in production. So one of our guidelines when we're writing this material is that we will never say, obviously you wouldn't do this in production. We will actually tell you this is how you do it in production. So what do we have here right now? I'm not going to go through everything because I'm going to ask you to do it, but just to give you a little hint. We have a little bit about Spring Boot and how it relates to Vaadin, and then we have some articles about architecture design of Vaadin applications, what kind of notation we recommend for documenting the architecture design, how we want to talk about layers, for instance. Then there's a little bit about monoliths, a little bit about microservices, how to structure your Vaadin projects. In Maven, we have single module projects, we have multi-module projects. The presentation layer is where all the UI stuff is going to be, and that's the most empty one because I've been focusing on basically the backend stuff for now because we didn't have any material about the backend before, but quite a lot of the UI. But for instance, our UX designers are currently working on a section here. This is also very much work in progress, but the intention is that it will tell you UX design for developers. So you're not UX designers, you're developers, but you still want to make accessible, good-looking business apps that don't look like they were designed by a developer because, well, I think we all know what developer-designed UX looks like. It's a copy of the database. Lots of fields and lots of columns. So our UX designers are actually working on this right now. This is one of the first drafts. It can change a lot, but I'm really looking forward to getting this material extended and published because I'm no UX designer, but I like my apps to look good. And I have no idea. There are so many things that I know nothing of. I actually learned quite a lot on Rolf's talk before launch about accessibility as well. So I'm hoping all that stuff will get incorporated into this as well. The first thing that we actually tried to migrate was server push. So this is something that we're now, it's still in the old section, but this is what we would like it to look like. So this explains everything you need to know to do server push in a Vaadin app, regardless of whether it's Flow or whether it's Hilla, including things like how best practices for using UI access, avoiding floods, how to avoid unnecessary pushes, how you do background threads, how you do thread fallbacks from a background thread to update the UI, how you use futures, how you do things with Hilla, how you use reactive streams, and so on. And then on the application layer side, the backend, we have application services, how to do background jobs, data consistency, validation, transaction management, optimistic locking, pessimistic locking. Eventual consistency is just a stop, but it's going to be expanded later when we start to write about Spring Module, for instance. We have information about the main primitives. We have persistence. This is how you use flyaway in Vaadin. If you saw Simon's talk before lunch, he talked about flyaway. It's covered here. Simon also talked about joke, how to do that. It's partly covered here as well. This is how you set up all those code generation in a Vaadin project. The repositories part, persistence part is maybe the part that I am least happy with right now. So this is going to be revisited multiple times before I'm really happy with it, I think. But anyway, there's quite a lot of material here. So, and now let's see if I can get back to my presentation. I think it's easier if I just go there. So now I'm going to ask you to think about your latest projects, or maybe not even your latest projects because you're all experts, right? But also look back at your first Vaadin projects and think about everything that you wish you would have known back then. And things that you think that are really, really working well with your current project in terms of patterns, documentation features, and so on, and also things that you wish somebody would tell you, or something that would be you wish would be better explained, or you know what I mean. And then I would like to bring out your pads or your phones or your laptops, and then you go to vaadin.com/docs. And then you go look for this building apps section, should be there. And then you start to see what do we actually have there. And then I want you to speak up and discuss. It would be awesome if you could actually discuss with the colleagues sitting next to you. What do you think about this? How do you do things? What would you like to see? And then I want you to tell me. And like I said, if you're really talkative, we're gonna stay here for a long time. If you're being Finnish, which means you're just sitting silent by yourself, hoping nobody will recognize you, then we will have an earlier coffee break. So here are the links. There you can find the links to the documentation. And if if you are Finnish and you're not comfortable speaking with other people, then there is this slido.com. I've never used it before, so I'm actually going to try it, where you can post comments and questions in writing, and they should show up on my screen here. And then let's see whether this works or not. I've never actually tried this format before, so it's going to be interesting. So let's see, how much time do we have? Let's start with 15 minutes of you just reading, and then I'm going to start asking some questions, unless there is any sort of discussion starting naturally. So that's your job, and go ahead. We're going to start looking at this link here. I can see the first question. Does it work? Yes, it works. So I can see now your questions on my screen. So if you don't want to speak up, you can write them here. I will then read them out and answer them as well as I can. Is there anything about monoliths? Yes, there is one page about monoliths. It's under architecture. And it will get expanded. The intention is that we're going to write more about self-contained systems and Spring Monolith, because we think that most Vaadin apps should be monoliths. You should only go microservices if you really need to go microservices. And it's gonna be, there's some text about it already, but it will be expanded even more. I just need to figure out what the Vaadin way of using Spring Monolith is going to be first. The doc says Spring Boot is the recommended way to build Vaadin apps. What about Quarkus? I was afraid that question would come up. Officially, you can use Vaadin with Quarkus, but the Vaadin way is going to be, for now, focusing 100% on Spring Boot only. And we want to limit the options. I mean, Hilla already doesn't work with anything else than Spring Boot. So for now, if you're on Quarkus, you're on your own, so to speak. Maybe in the future, but right now we're focusing on Spring Boot. Would it be helpful to have some overview quick start that would help me to navigate? It's overwhelming as I don't know if I need reader. I mean, that's a very good comment. We will provide some kind of a map once we have a little bit more content. The content and the structure is it's evolving. When we started out, I was working on a single. I think I started out with writing about architectures, and then I went to application services, and then I went somewhere else. And then you realize that if I write this over here, then I need to change this over here, and then it no longer makes any sense, and then I have to move things around. So that's a very important piece of feedback that we're gonna try to do something about. New documentation has formatting problems in Firefox Mobile. All right, thanks. I'm gonna talk to our team about that. Since Spring Boot is recommended, perhaps include a paragraph about what the developer will miss using other options. Maybe. What about Jakarta EE as it is an open standard? Well, Spring Boot uses a lot of those Jakarta EE APIs. So in a way we are using some parts of Jakarta EE already. Is the Vaadin way the only way? No, it's not the only way. If you already know what you're doing and you want to continue doing it, then by all means, continue to do it. This is mainly intended for like new developers who are just starting out with Vaadin, and instead of having to make all those mistakes on the road to learn how to use it, we want to show them that, hey, this is how we think you should do it. But we're not limiting people so that they are forced to follow the Vaadin way or burning. Yeah. If you don't want to follow the Vaadin way, you don't have to. It's mainly about documentation, and we try to write it in such a way that you can pick and choose. For instance, the section about server push applies to most use cases. I would say you're not required to structure your application in a certain way in order to be able to follow the directions about server push, for instance. Let's see where to start reading and what to do first when I want to build an application with Vaadin with a noticeable amount of users. That's a good question. We haven't really gotten that far yet. Something that I should probably mention as well is that this getting started section is going to receive a revamp as well, and the tutorial. So the getting started section is going to focus on how you get started with Vaadin, and then when you pass that one, you are ready to continue to the building app section, which then goes deeper into various sections. If this is to be moved to the top of documentation, the initial paragraph is probably too vague as an introduction of what one actually is and provides absolutely correctly. Now you're really active writing. So you're already finished. Within the Spring Boot section, there are only links to Spring. Will there be examples of the configure the Vaadin wrap with Spring Boot, Spring Security? Yes, there will be. Security we haven't even started to write about in the new way yet. I have some ideas. Spring Boot, how to set up Vaadin app with Spring Boot, that's actually covered in the project structure section already. So if you go to this project structure, you can see how to set up Spring Boot in a single module project or how to do it in a multi-module project. As for examples, I really think we should have real-world example applications that you can look at, but I haven't really thought about the best way of keeping it up to date and yet. But definitely there should be examples. Does that mean that we finally get a new book of Vaadin? The thought has crossed my mind, I have to say. I would hope that eventually building apps would read like a new book of Vaadin, that it would cover everything you need to know in a naturally flowing way. But maybe that's aiming for the stars. I don't know. But that would be awesome. Trying to find section about the best organized code within a single class. Yeah, no such section exists yet, but that's a good question. Something that's also still missing completely right now is how to actually structure your UI commit. So I have a branch that I've started already on how to decompose a view into subcomponents and how to connect them and so on. But I wasn't really happy with what I came up with and then patterns. For instance, I'm waiting for this full stack signals to arrive because you can do a lot of awesome stuff with that I would love to incorporate into the Vaadin way. But it's coming. Now it says disconnected, trying to reconnect this. That's why there's no more questions. No. All right, let's see. This is the first time I use this, so. Can you make login authorization and usual role management easy out of the box? Yes. Some of that we can already do with some of our commercial components, but this will be covered as slowly. I think if you saw this talk where Jonas demonstrated Control Center, where you could with a click of a button enable the single sign-on through people. So that's definitely it's coming, or we already have it, but it's not covered. Let's see. Now it's yeah. The control center is free. Yeah. What else? Discussion of several architectural concepts, MVC, MVP. Yeah, it's coming. For the record, my favorite pattern is MVVM, which is currently not possible to do in Flow without inventing your own framework. But when we get full stack signals or signals into Flow, that's what we're going to be using. And MVP, I used to like, I don't like it anymore. I also written on the blog 2015 why I don't think it's a good pattern. MVC, yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Cooperative design in a Vaadin app. That's a good topic. We should have that covered. Best way to allow user interactions, access roles, and so on. That's an interesting topic. My personal opinion there is that you should go more for permission-based access and less role-based access. meaning that when you're defining access on views and on methods, you specify a permission that the user must have in order to be able to do this. And then you have dynamic roles where you group different permissions under different roles. This appears to be a pattern that is becoming more and more common. Whether that's actually possible to do with Vaadin right now, I haven't actually checked, but it's coming. Examples in Gradle. No, I don't have examples in Gradle. Whether there will be any or not, I can't tell because I don't use Gradle myself. But of course, I accept pull requests. So if anybody here wants to write the examples in Gradle, I will be happy to receive them. Vaadin 7 sampler was a great tool. I agree. It's something similar for the current version. The only thing we have is that components documentation right now. But definitely, the sampler was good. I agree. That's the one I used when I started Vaadin as well. It was a pretty neat way to figure out what you can actually do with Vaadin. So that's maybe something to put on a consideration list. Getting started with Vaadin helped me to get an overview watching a video of developing. All right, 15 minutes past over. Developing applications, the code available. Yes. I think Marcus and I are gonna have a closer look at this getting started section to get it streamlined and get everything we need to know. UI testing, yes, it's coming. Old Doc says either use Selenium or by the Vaadin test extension. We're gonna cover UI testing as well. We're also gonna be covering all other types of testing, like integration testing, unit testing, and so on. We just need to figure out what the Vaadin way of doing testing is going to be first. Vaadin tests include test. Yes, it's going to include component pages. I haven't actually thought about what you're gonna do with the component pages. So any feedback ideas are appreciated there. Documentation and development application which supports multiple themes, normal and dark theme. And that's what Jouni explained this morning actually. So I think we should incorporate that as well. Documentation, let's see. Support. There was an interesting question here. Use services, entities, packages at the top level. Functional packages at the top level. Yes, actually, that's coming too. This has to do with this starting out with a hobby project, then you don't necessarily need a functional top level because the application itself is the top level. But eventually, you're gonna get these different. I have a DDD background, so I talk a lot of bounded contexts. So once you start to get these bounded contexts, they will then become the new top level packages, and then we get this subdivision under. So I'm definitely I'm on the same page with Josh there. Probably gonna be revisited how we actually want to structure packages and applications, and when we bring Spring Modulith into the mix, it might change a little bit as well. There are various ideas of how you could use Spring Modulith, for instance, in a Vaadin app, and some of them I find more, I find better than others. So we'll have to see. Now I have to see if there are any questions still. Oh, that's good project. So that means I'm getting the Now we're just gonna browse through these questions to see if there's something I haven't answered. Can I download the documentation so I can read it without internet connectivity? Do we have that feature in ESP? No, not at the moment. Yeah, again, Josh long advice. Protect these services controllers in the same package per domain. Avoid make everything public. Yes and no. I am myself a huge friend of package visibility, so I prefer to make as much package visible as possible. But I also know that there comes a time when the application or this domain, subdomain, or bounded context grow so large that if you have actually everything in there, it becomes really difficult to find anything there. So my view on this is probably that yes, you should have a, it's not probably, it is, this is my view on this thing. So you have it grouped by bounded context. So you have a orders module or you have a customers module or something. But within that module, you should be able to use sub packages to keep some kind of structure on your code. And then you use something like org unit to make sure that packages don't bleed into each other in an inappropriate way. The design section. Yeah, that is a good question. So whether I use C4 or not shouldn't impact the way I work with Vaadin. Yeah, that's a good question. The intention here was that we wanted to show also new developers how they can actually work out their architecture, how they can design, how they can visualize it, because we're all seeing architecture diagrams that are completely unreadable. There are often all kinds of boxes here and there and arrows going back and forth, and you can't tell anything from looking at them. And what I like with C4 is that you don't need a dedicated modeling tool for it. You can use it on a whiteboard, you can use it with pen and paper, you can use it with any off-the-shelf diagramming tool. And and it's also what we intend to use when we're actually explaining these different design patterns. So that's why I think it helps to introduce it as well. But yeah, it doesn't matter whether you use it or not. But that was my original intention. Maybe eventually when things start to grow, we may have to move some parts out to like a deep dive section or something like that, where we can put things that some people find really useful, but that isn't relevant for succeeding. And those kind of pages we might room into a deep dive, sort of where you go to look when or if you want. There is a typo in the links to consumer reactive streams. All right, thanks. I'm gonna fix that. Upgrading from 8.24 content requires to read at least 3 upgrade guides. And we have planned one consolidated guide. This is a common use case. I haven't thought that far, but this is a really good good point. In my opinion, you shouldn't have to read at least 3 upgrade guides to get there. But I also know that I'm not going to be the person that writes this guide, but hopefully somebody in our company will do it at some point. I can't make any promises right now, but it's very good that you're giving this kind of feedback. All right, so the last question was submitted according to my view 5 minutes ago. So let's see, it's a quarter past. So I received more comments and feedback than I had expected, actually. So I'm really happy about that. So you you did a good job. Actually, I thought half of you would just walk to the other section when I told you what you were about to do, but you stayed. That's really nice. Just gonna stop with a few final questions. Do you think this is a good idea, what we're trying to do here? Yes. So we should continue to work on this. You have a question? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So to summarize what you said, in case you didn't hear, and make sure that I understood it as well. So what you said that we should somehow structure the documentation in such a way that we don't lose the attention of senior developers who already know most of the stuff that we're writing about, like architecture, for instance. And then they start skipping pages because they think they know what it's in there, and then they miss this little part that is important that they actually didn't know about, that they should know about, but they just accidentally skipped over. Yes, that's an excellent point, and challenge one as well, challenging one as well. I guess it has to do with this scaling as well, and we want this to be useful for everybody, including senior developers, but also newbies who are just taking their first steps with Vaadin. So I guess I should now try to get my presentation to show the final slide, but I lost control of my presenter tools. I'm using a new function here that there that I've never used before. So there are many first time things I'm doing now. So those are my contact information. I very much want you to reach out and tell me what you would like the Vaadin way to cover. Also, if you have suggestions, this is how I think the Vaadin way of doing things are. I want to know about those as well. I might not agree with them, but I want to hear about them anyway. And unless you have anything else, I think I'm gonna let you go and have coffee a little bit earlier before the guys in the other section. Oh, they had the same idea. All right. Thank you very much for your attention, and it was very valuable for me, this feedback. And make sure you keep an eye on building apps in the coming months. Right. Thank you.